and welcome everyone to our CCNA Cyberops class for the week of it's actually for the day of 3/15/18. So it's Thursday, March 15th. Hard to believe it's already that far into March, but it is. Today's chapter, folks, that we're looking at is on Linux, and I'm going to straight up tell everybody here that there are probably people in this class that know a whole lot more about Linux than I do. I have had the RHCA, Red Hat Certified Administrator certification at one point, but I kind of went a different way and ended up more towards Cisco, more towards Microsoft, and towards Linux. But one of the things is if you work in security at all, if you work with anything, then you have to have Linux, or you will never be able to survive in the security world. So we're going to talk a little bit about Linux. Now, let me explain something to you about this particular course. Remember, we are trying to make a student into a SOC Level 1 technician. What that means is, don't think when you go through the Windows chapter, chapter 2, or you go through this chapter, and you go, well, my gosh, they're not teaching them anything about Linux. Well, folks, we're not trying to make people Linux experts. We're trying to make it to where they are good enough with Linux that they can exist as a level 1 SOC technician. So be aware, that's why we're not teaching everything. One of the different things that we've talked about is different pathways to get into this course. And let me go back real quick. Just presented it. I actually think it may be over here. Give me just 1 second, because I do want to show you this because it's worth looking at. If I click on the right thing. You think after presenting it yesterday, I'd be able to just pull it right up. Pull this over here. Welcome, whoever just popped in. Let me see if I can find the. Got him. Sorry, I don't have this pulled up earlier, but it just hit me. So. I think we've already done this. One of the things I want to talk about is how do we get students into what pre-skills do they need? Well, one of the things we talked a little bit about for Cyberops is the idea, obviously, of these cybersecurity essentials classes, but we also talked about these pathways, and this one I don't really think is a good one. That's do Introduction to Cybersecurity, Cybersecurity Essentials, then do CCNA Cyberops. I don't think the student's going to be ready for this, so I don't like this pathway at all. These two pathways I think are much more realistic, where you got, and in fact, I would just put Cybersecurity Essentials and Intro to Cybersecurity into a security class, Linux Essentials, Network Essentials, or Introduction to Networks and IT Essentials, and then that could be CCNA Cyberops. So I want to reiterate that. We're not, you notice here, we're not doing massive Linux. We don't expect them to be Linux gurus. We're just trying to get them to where they can operate in the SOC itself. Now, if you've got a Red Hat Academy, there's no reason why you couldn't use RHA 130 or 124 as this course, or Linux Essentials, either one. The neat thing about Linux Essentials are the labs are built in and they're free. They're hosted free too. Again, notice I did put these in chapter 2. If you have not seen it, I did drop in 2 extra labs for you. 2 PowerShell labs made by Deborah McClusker, so you can take a look at those and use those if you get a chance. But we want to make sure we're not making Linux gurus. If you are a Linux guru, perfect, and feel free to add anything to this you want. But we're not trying to get there. We're just trying to have some basic understanding so they can get around in the tools we're going to be using. Well, some of the value, pretty much everything you've heard before. It's open source. It is a very powerful CLI. You can script in it easily. You have more control over the OS. It can be rewritten any way you want, and it has better network control. Carl, if you want to, you may want to just turn your camera off because we're not going to be using cameras today. So. Linux in the SOC. Now, this is what we're looking at. We're looking at Linux with the Wireshark capture. We're going to look at Siegel. We're going to look at our tools, Bro, Miner, the things we use inside of our Linux security onion. There are many tools made inside of Linux. In fact, most of our security tools are built in Linux. So that's really, you've got to have a good basic understanding of Linux. How many of you have heard of Kali? Kali is a great tool. In fact, it's also going to be one of the tools that we use. I'm getting ready to, one of your classmates had a problem with, they jumped ahead and went ahead and started building the Chapter 11 for VM setup. And so I've jumped ahead and started working on that a little bit, and we'll be actually playing with that to make sure everything's working fine as we move forward. Also, one of the things I want to make you aware of is one of your classmates, I think it actually was Carl, I believe, who mentioned that he had some students playing around and they tried to do updates, and they were trying to update the repositories and said that, hey, guess what, it wouldn't work. This version of Linux they pulled is based on an ArchSpace kernel, and they're working on doing, it says, Carl, we're working on replacements and testing now. Are you working on it with Cisco, or are you just making one for yourself, Carl? You can come off mute. You don't have to stay muted.
We are, the main problem with the version that Cisco picked is, I think they did it for 32-bit, maybe for compatibility, maybe for reduced resources, who knows. But by the time they got it all finished, the team who was behind the version that they're using no longer supported 32-bit. So it violates the first rule of security. You can't update it.
Right.
So we built a 64-bit one, and we have the scripts in it. And I have the students testing the different labs to make sure that the 64-bit version will work. And when we have it all finished and packaged, I'll give it to everyone. And it's exactly the same one that you're using. It's just 32-bit and therefore can be updated.
Okay. So you mean 64-bit and can be updated?
64, yeah.
Yeah. And I do know that I made Asuyan, the product manager, aware, and they're also working on an overall 64-bit transformation for everything that's in there. And the decision was made originally because it's 32-bit for less resources, and the possibility of people not having 64-bit processors, because this is a worldwide program. And I was like, the possibility of that happening is pretty remote, but, you know, so good news is, Carl, when y'all get that packaged up and ready to go, let me know, and I'll dump it on a Dropbox, and we'll get it to everybody. So we'll put that out there. But thank you very much, and thank you for letting me know, because that is a good thing to know. Definitely a good thing to know. Like I said, Carl probably has forgot more about Linux than I'll ever know, because it's not my main thing. One of the things we do talk about that kind of gives trouble for students is the fact that, guess what, you're working in a CLI a lot. However, the good news is for Cisco students is most of those have worked in the CLI, so they're pretty happy in it. But it still gives them a little bit of trouble. So, what did I just click on? A Linux CLI on your web browser, so you can actually go through and do that in your web browser. Basic commands. Those of us who grew up on DOS, although they're different, a lot of these commands are not all that different to us. The other thing is I am a master of the man command. So in other words, if you don't know something, you can always look it up. For instance, we're going to show you the PS command, but if you don't know what PS stands for, you just man PS, and it will give you a snapshot of current processes, you know, some different examples, what each individual switch means as you put them in. By the way, I passed Sec Fundamentals on Monday, so I was happy about that, very happy. And so now I move on to do SecOps, and hopefully we'll get that passed in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So that's on my to-do list. But you see here some of the commands: move, chmod, which modifies file permissions, chown, ownership, DD for copying data, PWD for present working data, PS for process, SU, which lets you become a super user, or you can SU dash and become super user, and then sudo. So a lot of different commands that you can do. Ones that we use a lot are grep to try to find strings of characters, ifconfig, apt-get if you're using a version of Debian or Debian derivative.
I got some in my car though.
If you will, please mute yourself. Yeah, I just muted you. All right. So there's some basic commands, and we do have labs to run through those commands, so we're not, those labs are not too difficult. LS for list instead of dir, cd change directory, make directory, copy, moved, remove, grep, and cat. All these are common file and directory commands that are used, and they are used inside of our labs. Everybody, this is one of those things that people who work with Linux, everybody has their favorite text editor. If you have a favorite text editor, throw it in the chat. Let's see what we got. Give me your favorite text editor. Anybody? Nobody? Everybody hates Linux? Edit Plus? Okay. Get it? Yeah, a lot of people like that one. Or gedit, depending on Vim. Ooh. Really, Harry? No, I'm just kidding. Just joking, man. Just joking. Sublime. It all depends, and you know what? It all depends on what you grew up on and what you started playing with in the beginning. I'll be quite honest. Most of them, I don't have. They're all a little bit hard for me to get around in, and they're even much harder now that my hands don't work well. I'm trying to make my hands go to those the keys, but the big thing is have one and use one, and they do teach Nano, and they teach a couple other in here. In fact, I don't know if show my ignorance. We'll have to see what all is supported in this particular version. Have everybody tried these in the version we're using? Are they all supported in our current version? Anybody know? Nope. Should be any reason to gedit be. Beam should be here. Yep, that's here. Control Q. Let's see what else we got in here. Edit Plus. I'm pretty sure that won't be here. Oop. I think we got Nano and Beam, and that's it on these. Yep, Nano's here. But otherwise, they're not there. Yeah, there are significant differences. I agree with that, Carl. I do agree with that. I think V might be missing in one of the VMs. Can't remember. Okay, that may be true. Yeah, Jeff. It may be all the VMs may not be the same. So Notepad++. That's what I use in Windows. That's what I use with those. If you are a Linux expert, say, Carl, what would you think is the most full-featured? Do you think it's gedit, or do you think there are other versions that have better functions?
Well, gedit is great as long as you have a graphic user interface, and so most of the things are going to have a graphic user interface, and so gedit is like the way to go.
Right.
One of the problems with the VM that they put together is it's just so non-standard.
Right.
And I questioned this when it first came up, is why would they pick such an obscure version to work with? I mean, there's a lot of people who like Arch, but it's as if it's if they picked different commands just to be different. You know, Kali is based on Debian.
Debian, yep.
It's more specifically, it's based on a build of Ubuntu. And Ubuntu is the most downloaded version out of all of them combined. Again, why they went with the non-standard run, I really don't know. But once you find a list of Arch commands, you can, I mean, if you know what you're doing in Linux, then just finding the commands they substituted for everything is okay, but it is rather annoying.
Yeah, and I will tell you quite honestly, one of my biggest complaints on Linux is that it seems like every 5 minutes stuff moves for no particular reason. You know, from one build of a program to the next build, somebody moves the log files to a different directory, or they move something, and I'm just like, that's just please some standardization, which I think has happened better with Debian than with any of the other versions, unless you go with something like Red Hat, where it is a true Red Hat, where you've got an enterprise version that is not going to change greatly. So
yeah, your best two standard versions are Red Hat for the United States and Debian for the rest of the world. And most people don't run pure Debian. They use some version of Ubuntu because it supports drivers like audio drivers, video drivers, those kind of things. So it really works like right out of the box without having to go and hunt down all the little particulars. So, and you can do a lot with it. My lab, which I know is different than most of the other schools, all of the machines here are Linux machines. And then if we need Windows, we run it inside a virtual machine in the computer.
Do you run Fusion? Do you run Fusion, VMware Fusion, or do you run?
No. I don't pay for things. No, free. Free is the answer.
Okay.
And VirtualBox is free and powerful and does stuff. And so we do that, and then I can even my Windows is free. I use the 90D eval, and when it dies, I make them build a new one. So
Right, build a new one. That's a good idea, definitely. One of the reasons why a lot of people use Linux is because it is free. That is one of the things that's available. You can get a free part. Pretty much the thing is, everything in Linux is a text file. So everything. Memory, disk, monitor, directories, you name it, it's considered to be a text file. So that is an important thing to be aware of. This file host, which is just like the host file on a Windows machine pretty much, can be used for DNS, IP to domain name. It's a dangerous file because this is where if I'm a hacker, I'm going to go in here and try to redirect things if possible. There's an entire lab working on the text file, so go ahead and get those done and playing with the shell if you haven't played with it. We're going to look at some of these different services and ports. Now, obviously, this is some things you should already know. You should know 21 and 20, that's FTP, one's data, one's control. 22 for SSH. Now, one of the things I would add on here is that you also need to know, and it's very important that you know the protocol associated with these. So, FTP is TP. What is it? Let's do a quick little chart here and get a little bit of interactivity. Everybody, FTP. What protocol is it? Put it in the chat. We can throw it in chat. In fact, let's do it like this. Let's do which ones are TCP and which ones are UDP. So what we got for FTP? All right, it's TCP. What about SSH? Harry can't be the only one to answer. By the way, Harry, turn yours to everyone. Send it to everyone, not just me. All right. SSH is TCP 22. What about Telnet? TCP or UDP? All participants is grayed out. Oh, okay, sorry. TCP for here. SMTP. Oops, excuse me. This is Telnet. And then SMTP is TCP also, right? Yep. SMTP is, yep, it is TCP. Now, what about DNS? DNS is a strange little bird. And this is extremely important for you to know, okay? Stan says both. You are correct, okay? It is TCP for zone transfers, and things that occur between servers, and it is UDP for client requests. Okay, so believe it or not, DNS uses both. And what about HTTP? That is going to be TCP. And in fact, as we look down, pretty much everything down through here from down is TCP. And except for I'm actually drawing a blank on SNMP, I'm thinking that that is, is that TCP? I think it is TCP. Yep, I got to look that one up, y'all. I'm having a brain fart. Let's see here. UDP 161. All right. So I would have missed that one. Golly, I'm not perfect. I know that just completely blows y'all's mind. Let me ask you another quick question while we're here. What does Radius use? TCP or UDP? UDP. Yep. How about Tacus? Tacus Plus. TCP. Right. You want a way to remember that? Radius has got the U, Tacus starts with a T. Like I said, I'm not very smart, so I had to figure out ways to remember things. I think the way I'm going to remember SNMP is simple, means it's less than TCP, so it'll be UDP. That'll be my way to remember.
Sad. I don't care. I'll be so happy to be there with you. Just bring it.
So, all right, clients, Linux lab servers. Now, here's what I want. I do want to show you this. This particular lab is well worth doing. Yeah, you're right, Carl. It says technically FTP is both TCP for session establishment, UDP for transfer, but it also depends upon how FTP is doing its actual transfer, because it can do, well, the session setup can be different. You can have passive FTP. So, you're right about that, some debates, but technically, most of the time it's considered to be TCP, because TFTP is considered to be UDP, but, you know, 6 half dozen. You say tomato, I say tomato. This lab right here is very important because it allows you to see what processes are running. So if I just type PS, okay, you'll see a very basic item of what processes are running where. In this case, it's not going to do anything big because I didn't do the sudo PS. And then now I do this, and I still get the same because I'm not doing any of my options. Well, let's do sudo ps-elf. Now look at this. It's showing you all of the processes. It's showing you, okay, it's showing you the user ID associated with that process. It's showing you the PID. It's showing you the associated files in use. Now you can just do -E, okay. You can do -L. You can actually do -LH, and actually it should have been capital H, I think, and it will show a hierarchy to show what's being, what's actually underneath another process. Okay, so good lab to work in, good lab to do, good lab to have a basic understanding of the commands for PS. All right. The other thing that's really good is the same command that we used basically under Windows, which is netstat, which will show us what is connected and what ports are in use. Okay, what I know is what ports, datagram stream, to give you a good idea of different things connected and making ingoing, outgoing connections on your server. Again, remember, if you don't know something, just man it, and you can go and you can look at all the different items associated with that particular command. Are the man pages the greatest thing on earth? No, but they at least give you a good starting point. So you'll be able to use that. Configuration files. Obviously, many services have configuration files, and you go into them and you can set where the logs go. You can set basically all the variables when a program launches or is relaunched. So be aware that you've got these log files. You have an NTP configuration file. Here's a file that actually goes into NTP. We're going into and look at cat, the ntp.conf file to show you what your NTP pools are, and then also locations of other files associated with NTP in this case. Every running service pretty much is going to have a configuration file associated with it. Here's a snort file. This is where you also can screw up quickly, and sometimes this is where I get very frustrated with Linux at times, because files that are in one directory on one version of Linux are in a different directory in another version, or they're named differently, or they reference a file that's actually somewhere else and it's a symbolic link to a file that is, yeah. I'll be honest with you, sometimes I get a little disgusted with that, but it is what it is. It's Linux. Cool thing is it's completely and totally customizable, which is good. All right. But you also have to be aware of that again, if you're getting into, like you said, Carl, with these non-standard versions, it can be a little bit hard to make things work. Some best practices for hardening devices. Well, make sure nobody can pick them up and walk off with them. The world's best denial of service attack is when I walk in and steal all your power cables. Why would I steal your power cable? Anybody know? Any good reasons for stealing power cables? It's not as big a deal right now, but anybody remember back during all the bust of the housing market, how people were breaking in houses and stealing all the copper pipe out? Copper's worth money. So if I can go steal all your power cables and then strip off the outer casing, all I've got is copper. So woohoo, I make money. So you'd be amazed what people will do to make money instead of actual work. One of the things on Linux you want to do is minimize installed packages, just like we minimize services on Windows. Disable any unused services. Only use SSH, and don't let the root account log in over SSH. So have a separate account and then escalate your privileges once you get logged in over SSH. Just like Carl said, rule number one, keep the system updated. If you can't update it, then you got a big problem, and that is a problem with this version of Linux. Disable USB auto detection, because the best way to break into somebody's network is to take a 32 gig or 64 gig flash drive loaded with malware and drop it into the break room. Because I promise you, people are going to go, oh, look, a flash drive. In fact, if I was going to break into a network, what I'd do is take about 5 or 6 of them and just lay them around in different places and buildings, and I about guarantee you would be in no time. Enforce strong passwords. I actually wish that this thing had multi-factor authentication, because I think that's something that I try to do as much as I can. Force periodic changes and keep users from reusing their old passwords. Now, there's all different types of logs that we have here. We have application logs, event logs, service logs, and system logs. We see var log messages. That's where we see generic computer activity logs. Var log auth logs stores authentication related events in Debian and Ubuntu computers. Var log secure for Red Hat and CentOS instead of var log auth. Again, there we have our differences there, so it does different logins. Var log boot log stores the boot related information. And these are the var log, you can read through, I'm not just going to read them to you, but these are all the different logs that are out there that you can go into, and they are almost always off of /var/log, so you can go look at those by catting them, by opening them up, by tailing, all those different things if you want to see parts of the log. Now, in Linux, there are different file systems. We've already talked a little bit about these, but you've got X2, which is the default for a while until it was supplemented by X3, and then now you've got X4, and it will actually support NFS and some of these other here. There's a swap file system and some others. Now, one of the things that's been added in the X3 above X4 is the idea of journaling, and that is an attempt to make sure that the system can be corrupted in the event of a power loss. In other words, one of the things you want is an atomic. It's either written to the file system or it's not, or it's stored somewhere. The reason being you don't want a partial write and then you end up with corruption. So that's in there. The good news is you can actually have a 32 terabyte file in X3 if you want it. I don't know a whole lot about X4. Looks like extensions, increase supported file sizes, which if you got a file bigger than 32 terabytes, you're doing something. Not saying it couldn't happen, but you know, I think this is one of the things they did is they decided to kind of standardize with X3 and then take X4 to continue development to break out new items and new extensions. And eventually, when it gets stable enough, that would become the standard. So this one's interesting in NFS because we've actually gone from wanting iSCSI stores in our data centers to many different vendors saying the NFS storage is better because it's faster. So that's something that's been interesting. I actually have a Synology SAN set up, and instead of running iSCSI on it, they told us we needed to run NFS in order to be quicker. What do you mean, Carl? There's not a whole lot of difference between X3 and X4? Is that what you're saying, basically? Yeah, okay. So this is the mount command. We've mounted. Now, here's something that's interesting. And again, you're not making Linux gurus, but it's a good thing to know. And that is the fact that all files have permissions that are user, group, and other permissions. So UGO, and they are read, write, or execute. So you're going to see a series of 3 permissions for the user, 3 for the group, and 3 for other. You will also have, see whether or not it's a dash for a file or D for a directory. It is possible to set permissions using the chmod, and it is also possible to use either, you can do it with the numbering system. So there's an octal number, so 1 is execute, 2 is write, 3 is write and execute, so it'd be 2 plus 1, 4 is read, and if you do all of them, it's 7, so that's read, write, execute. So when you do the chmod command, you can actually, you put in the number, so chmod 777 would give user, group, and other all permissions. Not necessarily a great idea, but you know, it's what you could do. But you could also do chmod 744, and then you've got user has full permission, group has read, and other has read. Here, just like Windows, there's some funky little things you can do with files in the file system. One is a hard link, which basically takes 2 separate files and points them to the same space in the same location in the file system. So they are technically 2 files, 2 different names pointed to the same area. So here, when you actually add something to one of them, you will see it's added to both because they're basically both pointing to the same space. That's a hard link. A symbolic link is like a shortcut. It just points to another file. Okay, so you're going to basically do a symbolic link to another file. And some things you can do. Here's some GUIs. Here's that GNOME, KDE, Xwindows, or KDE, GNOME. I just looked at the most recent one. Let's see. So it's 3, and so it's actually out there. You can get it, you know, get more done. Things done with ease. So pretty cool. It's not bad. I mean, they've actually the GUI has come a long ways on Linux. And what I really need to do is just suck it up and go buy me a little laptop and stick Carl, the test, you know. What do you use, KDE or Xwindows? Or which one do you use, KDE?
I'm on. I'm old-fashioned. I actually like the Ubuntu Unity, and I
Okay.
refuse to give it up. Because
Okay.
once you get used to it, it has a lot going for it. So I'll probably be on the same version for the next 5 years until long-term support disappears, and then I'll have to be old. But then again, I don't change the ringtone on my phone, so I'm not like the best person to ask.
Hey, you like what you like, and that's, there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever.
Yeah.
This is kind of funny here. I hadn't seen one of these before, one of these slim books. Did anybody see yesterday? Microsoft had in their store, and I know we're in a Linux chapter, so I can't even say the word Microsoft. But they had laptops from Dell and several other vendors at 31.4% off in to help celebrate Pi Day, which I thought was pretty cool. Of course, I was really hoping they had the new Surface Book 2 on 31.4% off, but of course that was not part of it. This is using apt-get to do updates, okay, depending on whether or not your particular version supports apt-get, and has pointers to existing repositories, right, Carl? So apt-get update, or you can go software updater depending upon. There's a Windows Linux certification, yeah. And I will tell you something else too. One of the things that you're seeing from Windows with their headless servers, their headless servers are much more like it's a PowerShell environment, but it's much more like running a Linux box than it is like running an actual Windows box. So even they are kind of seeing that. So let's talk about a process and a fork. Process is just like in Windows, it's an instance of a running computer program, and forking is where a method where the kernel makes a copy of a process. So let the process make a copy. Well, the kernel allows a process to make a copy of itself. That way you can scale. Basically Apache can do forks in order to answer multiple different requests. This is where they're showing again this PS command, another very useful command, and this is something that's useful in if you're running VMware, is the top command, so you can see what's actually, they've got a command very similar to see what's running. But this shows you the running processes and how much CPU and memory they're using, and this is shown continuous in real time until you hit Q to quit it. So top's a very important command when you're doing troubleshooting. If I can ever get my thing back in, and kill can be used to stop a process, obviously. Now, do Linux boxes get malware and viruses and those types of things and rootkits? Heck yes. Okay. Android is really a flavor of Linux, and there have been multiple Android malware out there. It's one of those things like people say that Apple's never gets malware. Bull. It does. It gets it just as much as other places, maybe a little less, only because it's maybe a smaller target and a more closed system. But there is malware on Linux. The thing is, it tends to be there's a big argument there. Is it more secure or not? Most people would say it is because it's open source and you've got all these eyes looking at it. Some people would say because it's open source, it is less secure. Some companies go with Red Hat because they want somebody to call and gripe at when something goes wrong. So that's how Red Hat's made their money, is they basically give them value add. We're going to help support this software. Different people, different things. So there are rootkit checkers on Linux. There are super hardened versions of Linux you can download that have almost everything turned off except the very basics that you need. And actually, they have everything turned off. You just turn on what you want and need. So it can be made very, very secure. The only thing about this, I like the fact they say this, that checking for rootkits cannot be 100% reliable, because there are rootkits now that run in the BIOS and the UEFI on a motherboard. And if you've got one running there, it doesn't matter what you run on the operating system, you're not going to see it. The only way you're going to see that is by doing some type of network intrusion detection. Piping commands, using the pipe command and then a command with a target. So this is ls-l grep IMDA. It finds anything that has IMDA in it. Okay. And then, folks, that's chapter 3. Now, you will notice again, we did not make you into a Linux expert. I also think this is why you need to have that Linux Essentials class or that Red Hat 124 class before you come into this class. As we move forward and use our tools, we don't have as much Linux as what's needed to be successful in this class. All right. Now, I do want to show you this because I'm not going to even go over chapter 4. In fact, next week, along with hopefully most of the instructors in the state of North Carolina that are computer instructors, I will be in Asheville at the North Carolina Instructor Association conference, which is in Asheville. Next week, the chapter you're supposed to cover is network protocols and services. And if you will roll down through here, you will see that this is pretty much introduction to networks level knowledge. And it goes all the way down through, I mean, some of this, obviously, you do want to do the labs and want to do all that. But ARP, what are ARP functions? What are IPv6 addresses? What are router solicitation, router advertisement messages, and ICMPv6? Every bit of this is covered in Cisco 1, all right? Except for maybe DHCP. Some of that may not be covered, but most of this and that, but they don't do anything much from that, is covered in that very first CCNA 1. So I am not going to even go over this chapter. I hope that you come to this class with that information. Yes, James, very good point. Linux Unhatched is excellent too. That's a good little thing to throw on to put in any course that needs some Linux knowledge. And then we are going to pick up a week from now, not next week, but the week after, the last week of March, with network infrastructure, which you also know a great deal about and should not take us a ton of time. We're going to want to go over here and look more at these security devices and NetFlow and those types of things. Are there any questions before I stop sharing and we kind of move on? Keep working, folks. Remember, due dates are not set in stone. Okay. Are there any study aids for the test? James, what I used is I used this. Okay. I read the curriculum, did all the curriculum, did the labs. Okay, I'm gonna be honest, did most of the labs. I ain't gonna lie to you, I didn't do them all. I have something. Do I feel like the material is sufficient? I really do. There were a good number of items that I had to kind of make a WAG on, okay? And if anybody doesn't know what a WAG is, I'll explain that to you. Okay.